Welcome back to our final day of AirWorks 2020. It has been an exciting couple of days. We've seen some incredible new advances in drone technology and in the work we can do with these tools. Drones are entering new frontiers by enabling LiDAR applications and intelligent autonomous operations, and they're also making a difference here and now by helping businesses and governments do their work safely during an unprecedented pandemic. Most of what we talk about in the drone industry is technology, the capabilities of the hardware, the innovative features of the software, and what that enables. For example, what's the latest model? How do the specs compare? And how does that make new applications possible? Now, I've spent more than 25 years delightfully exploring the capabilities of remotely flying machines, and I'm continually amazed at how far we've come in just the past few years. But there's another driver of innovation and excitement, and it's what I devote my time to: regulations and policy. We're all able to move forward with great drone ideas because the regulatory systems in the United States and in other leading countries allow it. They value potential and progress, and they address fears in a rational way. Now, that hasn't always been the case, and I have to warn you, that may not always be the case. There are proposals in play right now that would restrict your ability to choose the drone you want to operate and would restrict the range of drone products that you can choose from. Now, that's not an abstract threat, it's very real. In fact, it wasn't long ago that almost everything you've heard about here at AirWorks was deemed illegal and prohibited by the federal government. Some of you may remember that. And to a large extent, that regulatory posture just a few years ago reflected the public sentiment about drones. Early adopters knew drones were fun and full of potential, but a lot of people thought drones would spy on them, or attack them, or crash into airplanes and maybe even kill them. And that's why it was such a big step when the FAA implemented Part 107 in 2016. It finally permitted routine commercial drone operation in the United States, and it did so by addressing this technology with a risk-based approach. The federal government found a way to address fears about safety in a rational, balanced, and forward-thinking way. That is to say, a risk-based approach is how you go from a government that fears innovation to one that embraces it. Now, Part 107 exemplified that approach. The FAA listened to perspectives from across the industry, set the operational goals that would allow professional drone operations to thrive, and set appropriate standards for safety. But it didn't lock itself into prior regulatory systems designed for larger aircraft with human beings on board. It recognized that new technology requires new management of risk, and it succeeded. And just look at what that has enabled. Over 180,000 Part 107 pilots have been certificated. DJI undertook a flight time analysis for all small drones in the United States in 2019 based on available data that's been voluntarily shared with us, and here's what we concluded. Last year, there were 87.8 million small drone flights in the United States, accounting for over 10.3 million flight hours, and of course, thankfully, 0 fatal accidents. So, drones are the safest form of aviation the world has ever seen. And drones are being used to bring benefits to industries and societies. For example, at least 430 people have been rescued from peril using a drone. These are life-saving operations including floods, missing persons, fire, avalanches, you name it. We've also seen substantial cost savings in various industries. For example, according to the drone service provider DroneBase, construction companies and developers report a 65% improvement in collaboration and a 53% reduced time to enable data insights. Insurance companies save 5.5 hours of time and over $300 per inspection when they use a drone. And according to another source, cell tower inspection costs are reduced by as much as 50%, and so on. And you've heard about these benefits throughout the conference this week. Now, that's what happens when you don't just give in to fear and take shortcuts, but when you evaluate the risks and implement policy that is appropriate and smart, based on what drones actually do and the risks they actually pose. And when policymakers listen to the people who know and use drones, So DJI and others long ago advocated for the outcome that is now known as Part 107, and for other policy innovations that followed. For example, we advocated for a reasonable online and low-cost registration system, and we were very pleased that the FAA took our advice on that. But Part 107 was 4 years ago, and I hate to say it, but to many of you it's obvious, that was America's high watermark for drone regulation. Part 107 reflected a strong commitment to enable beneficial drone use and deal with safety fears in a rational and reasonable way. But since then, progress on regulations has stagnated. In 2020, the drone industry in America is at a crossroads. Fear, not reality, is still holding back Americans from being able to perform more safe, efficient, and effective drone operations. Fear-based policies that would restrict or ban some drone operations are on the table. Now, plenty of you are already restricted because you could do more productive work, even save more lives if you could safely and routinely fly at night or fly over people. And after Part 107 took effect, the FAA was supposed to develop frameworks for those missions, but that hasn't happened. And the reason is fear. Security agencies made clear in 2017 that before the FAA could move forward in expanding operations beyond Part 107, they wanted a remote ID solution to help them identify and monitor airborne drones. Now, that process of stopping advancement didn't balance risk and reward, cost and benefit. It simply said innovation would have to wait. It was prohibited, once again, until they were satisfied. And so we waited and waited, and the FAA did not propose a remote ID regulation for years until the day after Christmas last year. That's at least 2 years later than expected. And that was even after the industry urgently developed and handed to the FAA its own set of recommendations. The FAA proposal that came out late last year requires almost every drone to transmit its information in real time to a giant government database via remote ID service providers who are expected to charge monthly fees, no matter how remote, routine, or low risk your drone operation. Now, that's complicated, it's costly, and it ignores the easier and simpler alternatives that exist and that should be an option. DJI hired economists to study the FAA proposal, and they estimate that remote ID as proposed by the FAA will cost over $5.5 billion to implement if the FAA does not change its proposal to more closely reflect the recommendations offered by its own Aviation Rulemaking Committee in 2017. Security agencies may not care about how that hurts your ability to fly, but you sure do, and of course we do too. So thank you to the 53,000 of you who filed comments earlier this year expressing how the FAA remote ID proposal would affect you. It was a clear signal that there is broad concern about the FAA proposal, and we're hopeful that the FAA will make changes in response to that feedback, which is the very purpose of the notice and comment process that is mandated by law. Now, if nothing changes, fear-based policy is going to cost you money, make it more complicated to fly, and delay your ability to fly in expanded operations. But there are even worse proposals out there. Some would take away your ability to choose the best drone for your job, or force you to buy a certain type of drone, or even ground your operation, no matter how beneficial. Now, you may have seen this story from just last month. More and more swimmers are being attacked by sharks along the beaches of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. A volunteer group wanted to watch for sharks using a tethered balloon with a camera on board, but they had to drop that plan because the camera and controller were made by DJI. And most of the Cape Cod beaches are a national park, administered by the Department of the Interior. Now, the Department of the Interior prohibits drones or even components that are made in China. All this group wanted to do is warn swimmers and surfers if there's a deadly risk in the water. But even on a beach in summer, fear of China seems more important than fear of sharks. This is where fear-based policy takes us. The Department of the Interior, through its Secretarial Order 3379, has grounded all of its drones, even though the majority of its fleet were made by an American company that used a factory in China. And it did so even though it undertook a thorough evaluation of the security of its DJI drones. And this example from Cape Cod is not even a drone, it's a balloon. It's not being used for missions involving national security. It's being used to keep people from being attacked by sharks. This isn't the only example of how a fear-based ban puts lives and property at risk. The Department of the Interior used to deploy drones to monitor wildfires, to ignite controlled burns, which combat and prevent those fires, and to measure fish in streams and to undertake other conservation projects, and now they can't. Now, some of that work must now be done with low-flying planes and helicopters, which carry their own safety risks. In fact, aviation accidents are actually the leading cause of death for wildlife biologists. But setting that aside, some of the work just isn't being done at all. And that's just the start. There are many proposals in Congress and in the White House, namely the American Security Drone Act and a draft executive order that would ground drones across the whole federal government based on where they are made, or even just where their components are made. And they wouldn't just apply to the federal government itself. They would apply to any organization that works for a federal agency or one that accepts federal grant assistance. That means state and local fire departments, police departments that want to use drones to save lives. And it means high schools and universities that want to use drones to teach students. And it also means nonprofits that want to use drones to improve their communities. And that also means you. If you ever need to or want to fly over federally managed lands or work for a client or partner who does government work, you're included too in the scope of these kinds of bans. Now, that isn't a fair or rational policy outcome. These restrictions are purported to be about cybersecurity, the fear that data from those drones could be sent to who knows where, against the wishes of the user. And, that's a reasonable thing to worry about. But maybe not so much for pictures of trees and moose and sharks, but certainly for some other government functions. But the government is not dealing with that risk or that concern in a reasonable way. So let's be clear. Drone pilots who fly sensitive missions, whether that's for government agencies or critical infrastructure operators or private companies, they deserve to have technology products that meet their security needs. But there are no standards or specific national requirements for drone technology cybersecurity. And the proposals that are based on where a drone is made are a very poor substitute. They would block a drone with rock-solid security just because it's assembled in China, but they would give a free pass to a drone built in America even if it had security flaws. That's a problem. It's not how we treat any other technology when it comes to cybersecurity assurance. Now, DJI supports the creation of real drone security standards that govern how a drone actually performs and functions. But until those exist, we look to expert studies to examine and validate our security, and there have been several of those. Here's a list: NOAA, Kivu Consulting, the Department of the Interior, NASA, Idaho National Laboratory on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security, and Booz Allen and Hamilton. Let's look at the latest independent evaluation, which Booz Allen Hamilton did for Precision Hawk's Center of Excellence. Booz Allen studied 3 products, including the Mavic 2 Enterprise, and its work was helpful in 2 ways. First, they spotted some minor to moderate security issues, and we developed mitigations for them. We appreciate the ability to improve our products via input from anyone. Second, they found no evidence that the data or information collected by these drones is being transmitted to DJI, China, or any other unexpected party. The executive summary for their report is available on Precision Hawk's website. If you use DJI drones for work or for government operations, I encourage you to read it, as well as the earlier reports about DJI drones that have reached similar conclusions. And by the way, we've all seen DJI's competitors trying to raise suspicions about our data security without any proof. But I still haven't seen a single third-party evaluation of their security, let alone the multiple public reports over 3 years like has been done to DJI products. Of course, competitors have a strong incentive to stir up concerns about our products, call it fear-mongering, but they don't have any hard evidence to back up their claims, just like our critics in government have never presented any evidence either. It's a losing strategy in the long run, because making the public and the industry and government officials afraid of drone technology will rebound on the entire industry. Indeed, driving people and government officials to fear drones more than they already do is a losing proposition for every manufacturer and every drone operator in the long run. Meanwhile, plenty of other technology that we use every day, computers, cameras, phones, and the like, all the equipment you're using to watch this video, those have addressed data security concerns with standards, not just by examining where it was made, but by understanding how it actually functions. But drones are being treated differently, and that hurts us and it hurts you. For an industry that has worked so hard together to advocate for fair policies for the past decade, this is worrying and even tragic. Our industry has spent years arguing that drones should not be subject to discriminatory policies that hold us to a higher standard or to different standards. Do you remember when the industry as a whole and you pilots who are working in the field, you had to worry about privacy laws that treated a drone with a camera different from a camera on the ground in your hand? Or do you remember when you had to be certified to fly a manned aircraft in order to fly a drone for work? Those were restrictions and requirements based on fear without regard to reality. And this is one of those as well. So we're at a crossroads. Will myths and fears about drone data security, pushed not only by politicians with an agenda, but companies that hope to capitalize on fear, will they drive extreme and irrational policy outcomes that stop you from doing good things with drones? Or will government and industry play a helpful role to treat drone technology like any other and develop standards so you can be assured that your equipment protects your data? Will the drone industry turn on itself by throwing fuel on a fire that can burn all of us, ultimately leaving you with fewer and more expensive options? Or will the industry recognize that different organizations need different drones for different needs, and that drone users deserve fair competition on price and performance, rather than a distorted market warped by political objectives? The risk and consequences are very real. We're already living with bad outcomes because of fear. Rules for flight over people, flight at night, and beyond visual line of sight have been delayed 5 years or more because of security concerns. And a heavy-handed remote ID proposal will cost you money and impose new hassles each time you fly. The most innovative federal agency drone program now blocks scientists from preventing wildfires and spotting deadly sharks. The FAA got it right 4 years ago. Part 107 was an honest look at risks and benefits, and it allowed our entire industry to thrive. Businesses, jobs, scientific research, education, and some very cool photos and videos. Even lives that have been saved, hundreds now. But it's slipping away. And if ham-fisted regulation is allowed to restrict what drones you fly, it's only a matter of time before it can restrict whether you fly at all. What can you do about it? Well, for one thing, contact your members of Congress. Seriously. These egregious drone security proposals are proposed in a vacuum of knowledge about how drones really operate and what they really do. If your senators and members of Congress don't know any better, they might support bad policies. But if they know that people in their districts use drones safely, helpfully, and productively each day, and that you vote, they may start listening to what you have to say. Your industry should get involved too. Across AirWorks, we have seen companies in almost more industries than we can count: construction, engineering, surveying, public safety, energy, mining, and many, many more. Your operations are at risk. Your voice matters. If the elected officials who propose these bans hear only from the drone industry, they may think the impact is isolated. If they hear from the American industries that have come to rely on drones and that are capable of managing security issues and choosing products fit for purpose, they will realize the truth. So, if you belong to a trade association, whether related to drones or your industry, please take the time to brief them on the issue and explain how their future innovation using these revolutionary tools is at risk. We are happy to sit down with them, virtually speaking, and bring them up to date on these developments so they can determine whether and how to engage on behalf of their members who use drones. And remember, what you are asking for is entirely reasonable. You should demand that all drone regulation, whether it concerns safety or privacy or security, is risk-based, premised on technology standards that allow open and robust competition in the marketplace. Government knows how to do this right. They've been doing it this way for many other technologies. And finally, I want to come back to where I started. A risk-based approach is how you go from having a government that fears innovation to one that embraces it. The risk is real, but the path to a solution is real too. If you care enough to be part of AirWorks, we hope you'll care enough to help defend what you were able to do now, protect your freedom to choose the products you want, and keep flying freely in the future. Thank you. And now let's go back to Denise Hibbard to tell you what's in store next at AirWorks 2020.
Thank you, Brendan. AirWorks has always been an event at the forefront of the drone industry. This year, we, like countless other companies impacted by the COVID crisis, have adapted the way that we work amidst these changes by bringing AirWorks online. Over the past 2 days, we revisited why we started as a company and shone a spotlight on the partners who are doing amazing work around the world. Speakers from many different industries and organizations showcase the various use cases as well as how our industry is growing and adapting. We hope that through your AirWorks journey so far, you've gained new knowledge, made a new contact, or simply been inspired to try something new. It's exciting to see how the commercial drone industry persevered through these challenging times. Our continued pursuit of empowering more people with drone technology is a great example of a technological advancement that drives change. This is especially important right now that the world is faced with a lot of uncertainty. When we first launched AirWorks in 2016, we had just over 200 attendees. Over the past 4 years, this attendee base has grown nearly 200% for our in-person conference. This year, despite the challenges in switching to a virtual format, we are excited to see record attendance and support from our community here in the US and across the world. What our attendees valued most from our in-person conference was the AirWorks community, where they could connect with others in the industry to share ideas and build new business relationships. We were unsure of what this sense of community would look like now that we're no longer able to have face-to-face conversations. But we made it our priority to ensure that we include the same, if not more, opportunities for networking across the different channels throughout this event. By now, you've hopefully had a chance to connect with others via the AirWorks community, via discussion in the Slack forum, or even on your own brain date. We still have full 2 days left of programming, along with plenty of opportunities to connect with fellow attendees. The Participate tab on the top of your screen is your interactive hub for this event. If you haven't already joined our Slack forum, head to the Participate tab and request access. We'll be keeping the Slack forum open for a month after the show concludes, offering a unique opportunity for you to continue the conversation beyond the confines of this virtual event space. We still have 2 more raffle drawings for the AirWorks game. To get involved, you'll also find those step-by-step instructions under the Participate tab. If you haven't received the game code via email, we'll be posting that again in the Slack forum just after this keynote ends. We've hidden QR codes throughout our programming and via our sponsors. Note that the QR codes during concurrent breakouts are the same, so hopping between different breakouts will not result in extra points. If you're curious how to find our sponsors' QR codes, head to the Partner Hub on the top menu and click through each sponsor. On each sponsor's page, you will see a prompt guiding you to where you can find that sponsor's unique code. The best way to network with fellow attendees is by scheduling or attending a brain date. Choose a topic that interests you and a time that you're available, and invite others to join you in discussion. Brain date allows you to skip the uncomfortable introductions and get straight to talking about a shared interest. It's hard to know exactly what the future holds, but if there's one thing we've learned from this past week and this whole experience, it's that we as an industry are resilient and we have the capacity for growth amidst change. Events these days look very different, but as human beings, it's in our very nature to find ways to connect, even when challenges arise. My hope for the future is that we can emerge from this stronger and not simply step back to the comforts of the past. I'm grateful for all of you who trusted that the virtual setting could be a rewarding experience, and I look forward to meeting all of you in person very soon.